big shot for LB, and up goes the finger. He's got 5. They're 9 down, 5 wickets for Ravi Jadeja, the latest $2 million man of the Chennai Super Kings.
Hello and welcome to episode 32 of Radio Cricket for the week beginning 10th of December 2012. That's 32, the number of incriminating photos that Piyush Chawla has of the Indian selectors. I'm Nishant Joshi and I'm joined today by the greatest leg spinner the Czech Republic has never seen. He's got a mean googly, but an even meaner zooter. It is James Marsh.
Yes, hello Nishant. You should see my slider too. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well, and of course I have been emboldened by the news of the past 24 hours, of course. We have learned that the hero and saviour of world cricket has finally been selected to go to the upper echelons of the game. That is, of course, Ravi Jadeja has been selected for the Indian Test side. And to be honest, James, Christmas has come early for me.
Well, indeed, yes, as you've put it, Nishant, Jadejageddon is upon us. So, I mean, you've campaigned for this for such a long time. I mean, you must be absolutely over the moon. Can you take full credit for this?
Well, James, I don't like claiming credit for a lot of things. As you know, I'm a behind-the-scenes sort of person, but I do believe that I can single-handedly claim full credit for Ravindra Jadeja's elevation to the Test side. Quite honestly, thanks to our tireless campaigning, even in the face of recent setbacks such as Yuvraj Singh's selection. I do think that we put in quite an incredible shift in just making everybody aware of Jadeja's feats. He's done the hard yards, I suppose. He's got one of the best all-round statistics in world cricket right now in terms of domestic stuff. He's averaging 27 with the ball and 53 with the bat. He's got 2 triple centuries in the past few weeks. And really, it's only a matter of time before he's elevated to the stage of captain as well.
Well, there's talk that there might be a vacancy there, of course, but so perhaps if Sachin, the obvious candidate, doesn't step up, then we might see Ravi in place as well. As you say, his stats are impressive at the moment. He leads the run scorer charts in the Ranji Trophy as well. He's got 794, but Nishant, last week I called him the Andy Carroll of cricket, you know, someone who's weighed down by an absurd price tag he'll never live up to. So, you know, why on earth should we expect that he will be able to in the Test arena when perhaps he hasn't done in the shorter forms of the game?
Well, James, I'm going to ignore your slightly blasphemous tone there, and I'm going to just look at the facts. I mean, the facts are that Jadeja, in the past few weeks alone, he scored more runs than the likes of Tendulkar has in his entire Test year. He scored more runs than Dhoni in the entire Test year. You look at the likes of Kohli, Yuvraj, he's outbatted them all, and to be frank, he's going to go into the fourth and final Test at Nagpur and finally be India's saviour. It is, of course, this Thursday, which is the day we've all been waiting for years on end. And to be honest, I'll be having a few quid on Jadeja to maybe not 300, but at least I'll have a tenner on a 250 for sure.
Perhaps that's not such a bad bet, Nishant. I'm sure we've both made worse in the past, but I think in a funny sort of way, coming into the Test arena might possibly liberate him from this pressure he's had in some of the short forms of the game. I think, you know, perhaps Indian fans aren't quite convinced he's the answer, and that's obviously based on some of his performances in ODIs. If you think back to that 2009 match when Sachin made 175 to bring India within reach of Australia's 350, but then Jadeja had a massive brain fade and he managed to contrive some sort of absurd run out. So perhaps on that basis he should be coming in to replace Gambhir rather than Yuvraj Singh. But I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see what he does. So Nishan, you've obviously seen a lot of him, but what do you think of the specific attributes he's got to make it in the Test arena?
Well, James, you ask what Ravi Jadeja can bring to the team. I'll answer that question with another question. What can't Ravi Jadeja bring to the team? He brings the sort of qualities that we all look for in a cricketer. He is a three-dimensional cricketer, as of course we know. He is India's best fielder. He is arguably the world's best fielder, but we just haven't seen him on the biggest stage yet. So we'll give him the benefit of doubt. We'll call him the second best fielder in the world right now after Steve Smith, of course, and another player who's just waiting for that moment to strike gold in the Test arena. And like I said, he is a 3D cricketer. He is a number 4 batsman for India. He could come on first change or he can open the bowling with his really particularly difficult difficult to get away brand of left arm darts, non-spinning occasionally, but he might get just enough turn to trouble the English batsman at Nagpur, and by that I mean it might just hold its line occasionally, and it might just spin on sometimes, and it might just keep low a bit. And with Jadeja, with the ball, that's the beauty of it. You never know what you're going to get. And that's where I think he comes in as not only India's X factor, but as India's question mark.
Well, talking about 3D cricketers, perhaps the most 3D, particularly when he's standing sideways on, is Virender Sehwag. And I just like to talk about some aspects of his performance, which I think were possibly indicative of India's malaise as a whole, and of course the reason why Jadeja has come in, not that Sehwag himself has been dropped. I just thought that in the field, in this particular game, Nishan, India, they looked like a rudderless ship, but one where the captain and crew seemed to have been quite happy just to drift along, and I think there was an incident involving Sehwag, or rather not involving him, in the first innings when Pujara dropped Cook. It was just slightly absurd because Sehwag wasn't fielding at first slip where he usually does, and there didn't seem to be any sort of rational explanation for this. People have suggested India have experimented with some sort of slip rotation, but this seemed to be more just some sort of mad random merry-go-round. And the second incident involving Sehwag, which just seemed to exemplify this lack of focus from India, was his second innings dismissal after India had actually done quite well to bring themselves back in the game by skittling England towards the end of their first innings. And then Sehwag and Gambit actually put on quite a good opening stand of 86, but then Sehwag was bowled for a gate which was almost as wide as his plate. Hishan, and it was just an astonishing post-lunch dismissal. But anyway, as I say, Sehwag has retained his place, but of course Yuvraj, Harbhajan and Zahir have been dropped. So Nishan, what do you make about those players going out of the Indian side?
Well, it's no surprise to see Yuvraj dropped after a really, really barren series. Yet again, he's proven that he's just not good enough to play at test level. Of course, this was the first test series after his comeback to international cricket, and it's a shame that he's kind of picked up where he left off, in the sense that he just doesn't seem to have the mental fortitude, and he really, really struggled against Graham Swan in particular, and he just doesn't seem to have what it takes to succeed at test level, very sadly. Then you have Harbhajan Singh, who didn't get a game in the last test and has been dropped for Piyush Chawla. It does seem like the last throw of the dice. Desperate times do call for desperate measures, and it does seem like Indians are going on a hunch that England might just struggle against leg spin. Piyush Chawla hasn't been tearing up the domestic scene that much, but most interestingly was seeing that Zahir Khan has been dropped ahead of Ishant Sharma, and even though both bowlers have been pretty poor in this series, in the first test especially, Zahir did show that he is very capable master of reverse swing, even though he is, at this stage of his career, he's terribly unfit. He is still India's most experienced bowler, and he does know how to work over a batsman, and he's the only Indian bowler, he's the only Indian pace bowler at the moment who actually has the nous to work out a batsman and actually figure out how to dismiss him. And the thing about Zahir is that even though he might not get wickets, he does offer control most of the time. In this series, he has gone for an economy rate of 2.4, which is comfortably the best of the Indian bowlers, and he hasn't taken many wickets, but at least you know he's not going to leak too many runs. If you compare him to the likes of Ishant Sharma, who's had a horrific return to Test cricket since his injury comeback, Ishant Sharma has taken just 4 wickets in 4 tests this year at a strike rate of 177 balls per wicket, and it really is incredible to see that the Indians have dropped Zahir in favour of Ishant, considering just how poor he's been. Ishant Sharma had a bit of a nightmare in the last test match, taking just 1 wicket for 78 runs in the match, and I would say that Ishant is an embarrassment to his team, to his family, and more pertinently to all men whose names end in Ishant.
Putting India's loss in the third test at Eden Gardens in statistical perspective, Nishant, that's actually only the 8th time a side has batted first at that venue and lost in 38 tests there. It's also the first time India have lost back-to-back test matches at home since March 2000, when they did so against South Africa, and it's the first time England have won twice in a row in India since 1977. So this was quite a sort of seismic loss for India. India. So I suppose inevitably people will look at the captaincy of MS Dhoni. He's perhaps sometimes rather unkindly referred to on Twitter as Donut, but his side are certainly rather full of holes at the minute, Nishant. So anyway, what's your take on Dhoni? He's coming under pressure. Is that fair?
Well, I think that if you first look at Dhoni when he started out in 2007, and of course he led India to that famous T20 World Cup win, it really was his leadership that won them the World Cup ultimately. Of course, it was based on a few flukes here and there, and this is where we can sort of retrospectively look back at what I've been trying to gently nudge some people towards for a few years now, and to say that sports and cricket right now is more results-oriented than process-oriented. And if you look at the way that Dhoni, for example, managed the bowling in that T20 World Cup, and, for example, some IPL finals since then, there have been some rather fortuitous moments which even his most ardent supporters would say that he's pretty much gotten away with, and most famously I would say bowling Joginder Sharma that last over against Pakistan, which was arguably one of the most lucky decisions of all time. So tactically, I think I've always said that Dhoni has never been the best captain tactically, but in terms of pure leadership, he's always been one of the best leaders I think I've seen in any sport. And to be honest, this is the point where you kind of question, is his tactical nous really that poor that he can't get back from this situation in test matches? And of course, the question that has to be asked, is there any alternative to Dhoni? And right now you look at the alternatives and there's not really anybody who's banging the door down in terms of captaincy. Perhaps a year ago you'd have said Gambhir really deserved it. Even a few as 6 months ago you'd say that Gambhir would have been really in the running. Of course then he got usurped by Virat Kohli, who hasn't set the world alight in test. You've got some people even calling for Sachin Tendulkar to be named as temporary test captain after the series, which I did find quite amusing. But the long-term man, as we have mentioned a couple of weeks ago, is Ravi Ashwin for me. I do think that he has the best cricket brain India's seen since a young Ravi Shastri. And I really think that he's the man. He's got the brain to outthink bowlers. He's clearly a very intelligent batsman as well. In fact, India's form batsman after Pujara at the moment. And I really do think he's got a calm head on his shoulders. And eventually he's the man to take over from Dhoni. But perhaps not just yet.
Well, Nishant, I think if India are looking for someone who's experienced, knows his own mind, and incredibly skilled, surely the man to take over from Dhoni is Prabir Mukherjee.
Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of Radio Cricket. We do hope you'll join us again at the same time next week, when we do hope to be reporting on the first ever quadruple century on Test debut by none other than Ravi Jadeja.
Yes, if bookies are foolish enough to offer any odds on that, then do get your money on it. But for now, I've been James Marsh.
I've been Nishant Joshi. Goodbye.
I think it was a very poor performance, one of the worst things I have ever seen done on a cricket field. Good night.